Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, one of the rarest NES games, a rare NES Disney sequel, and an overlooked SNES gem. Hi, I'm your host Jared, and today is January 19th, 1994. Once the mascot for a rival company, now being ported out to retain relevance. Released in January 1994, was Bonk's Adventure for the NES. Bonk's Adventure is a side-scrolling action platformer. Play as the caveman kid, Bonk, with an oversized noggin perfect for bashing. Attack by headbutting enemies or by jumping up and landing headfirst into all kinds of evil dinosaurs. You can also repeatedly flip to slow your fall for farther jumps. Eat huge chunks of meat to transform into stronger, weirder versions of Bonk. Play some mini-games and defeat bosses at the end of levels to defeat the evil King Drool. Bonk, the character in his games, is best known for being the prominent face of the TurboGrafx-16. He served as a mascot of sorts, trying to be put against the likes of Sonic and Mario as the guy that would convince kids to buy a TurboGrafx. By this point in early 1994, Bonk has 3 games already on the TurboGrafx-16. Bonk, Bonk's Revenge, and Bonk 3, Bonk's Big Adventure. However, the TurboGrafx-16 was already well on its way out. From this point in 1994 on, it only has a handful of new games coming out. It wasn't doing great in 1993 early on, so Hudson Soft saw the writing on the wall. They were porting some of their most prominent games to other platforms. This includes games like Bomberman, but the biggest one was Bonk, their once biggest star. Bonk's Adventure on the NES was not the first time it got ported though. It was first ported onto the Nintendo Game Boy in 1992. It would also get ports for Amiga computers and even an arcade version in Japan. When it came to the NES version, it was not seen as a big deal and nobody really cared about it. Nintendo Power did a preview of it over a handful of pages, but not until their May 1994 issue, even though they had already reviewed it months earlier. Now, I can only assume that they had some empty space they needed to fill for that issue. Speaking of, that Nintendo Power review was the only one we could find for the NES port. They awarded it an average score of a 3.2 out of 5, saying that it doesn't control as well as the Game Boy version, which maybe? I don't know, I've never played the Game Boy one. You can argue that it's weaker on the NES since the TurboGrafx-16 has better graphics and better sound, but between the two, I always preferred playing the NES version. I don't know, am I the weird one? Bonk's Adventure has been re-released and ported a ton since then, but never the NES version. Things like the Virtual Console or downloadable versions, it's always the TurboGrafx-16 original. The NES port has never been put onto anything else. Also in 2003, it got a whole remake for consoles only in Japan, and it's all kinds of horrific. If one overlooked obscure NES game wasn't enough, how about a forgotten sequel? Also released in January 1994 for the NES was Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers 2. Rescue Rangers 2 is a side-scrolling action platformer. Play as Chip and Dale as you make your way through all kinds of different levels. Once again, pick up objects to throw like boxes, only now you can throw them diagonally and charge them up for a super throw. But you can also do that cute thing where you hide in the box. Every now and then, call in some help from the other Rangers, Gadget, Monterey Jack, and Zipper. Defeat bosses at the end of levels and stop the evil Fat Cat from stealing the Pharaoh's urn, and of course, do it all in 2-player co-op. Rescue Rangers 2 was developed and published by Capcom. It's based on the children's animated series which aired from 1989 to 1990, which I thought was way longer than that, with a theme song that still slaps. The first Rescue Rangers game was also made by Capcom, and it's finally remembered as another solid 2-player NES game right alongside co-op classics like Contra and Ninja Turtles 2. However, very few people knew about or even played the just as good sequel. This is for a few reasons, like being released so late in the NES's lifespan, or the cartoon's syndicated television run winding down by this point in the mid-90s. But really, it's because by now, most coverage and advertising space for NES games and media outlets was not prioritized. It's early 1994. The SNES is in full swing. The Genesis is going strong, and we just had recent releases of the 3DO, the Jaguar, and the Sega CD. there just weren't many major NES games left that were worth to talk about. As such, Rescue Rangers 2 was just seen as a filler release and not given as much as a second glance. It got minimal preview coverage, like the 2 pages from Electronic Gaming Monthly, but not until their January 1994 issue. Nintendo Power did do a 6-page walkthrough in their January 1994 issue, but then never even reviewed it themselves. EGM did, giving it an average score of a 7.2 out of 10. The only full review came from GamePro magazine, stating how much they liked that Capcom tried to make it play out like an actual episode of the cartoon with a lot more cutscenes, and that the gameplay is just as reliable, if still as easy, as the first. Sales numbers are not known, but Rescue Rangers 2 has gone on to become one of the rarer NES games in its library. Thankfully, if you want to play it today, it is readily available in the Capcom Disney Afternoon Collection for Steam, PlayStation 4, and the Xbox One. Don't worry, the NES wasn't the only thing getting obscure releases in January. Released this week in 1994 for the Super Nintendo was Skyblazer.
Sony's most impressive action title to date is ready to soar onto your SNES. It's Skyblazer. This video store exclusive is available on Super NES format only and is a great mix of side-scrolling action, puzzle solving, and special powers and tactics. Other features include incredible huge bosses, an overhead map, and a radical soundtrack. Critics are on fire over Skyblazer, heart-pounding SNES action from Sony ImageSoft and Columbia TriStar Home Video.
Skyblazer is a side-scrolling action platformer. Run, jump, and attack your way through numerous levels. As you play, you'll gain new powers to use, letting you do things like glide, climb up walls, and cast all kinds of magic spells. There's also a few flying stages, with side-scrolling ones that play out similar to a shoot-'em-up, and some behind-the-back 3D flight stages making use of the Mode 7 technology. Defeat massive, awesome bosses at the end of levels, and defeat the evil Ashura. Skyblazer was published by Sony ImageSoft and developed by Studio Yukiyote, whose only other game by this point is the 1992 Hook game for the Super Nintendo based off the movie, which you can totally see the similarities. This is another one of those releases that had to have some censorship for the Western release. Any blood was changed to the color green, and some references to Hindu gods were altered. Skyblazer was not a big release. It wasn't a big deal and was not seen as something exciting. It was a budget title meant to be made cheaply by a relatively inexpensive studio for a cheaper price, and in the US was made exclusively for video rental stores instead of big box retail. Promotion of Skyblazer was limited, at least for North America. It got some preview coverage in places like EGM and a 6-page walkthrough in Nintendo Power issue 57. However, in the UK, it got a single gaming magazine advertisement and got a one-shot comic in Manga Mania, a publication all about all things Japanese animation and manga series. The comic is 8 pages long, and that same issue of Manga Mania even had a contest where you could win the artwork from that comic. I have no idea if anyone ever did. Any UK viewers watching right now know anything about it? Reviews for the game were positive though. GamePro magazine gave very high remarks all around. EGM gave it an average score of a 7.8 out of 10 with the Editor's Choice Gold Award. And Nintendo Power awarded it an average 3.7 out of 5 score, saying that the story is nothing you haven't heard, but also the graphics are uninspired? Did they even see some of these bosses? Reviews used to make no sense at the time. Skyblazer went on to be a forgotten, overlooked title with not a whole lot of sales because of its limited release. It also never got any kind of port or re-release, so the only way to play it now, for real, is finding a copy of it for your Super Nintendo. As for everything else released this week, he's also just as obscure. Here's Editor Dylan.
Anyone else sick of platformers? Me neither. But what if you had to play one starring the most unlikely protagonist ever? Lester the Unlikely for the SNES is the definition of sticking to one idea, even if you learn early on that it's not a very good one. You play as a frail, awkward, generic 90s nerd who somehow falls asleep on a cargo ship and wakes up shipwrecked on a tropical island. Imagine you're playing a cinematic platformer akin to Prince of Persia or Flashback, but your movement is worse, your attacks are worse, and undoubtedly unlikely your posture is worse. That said, it's a surprise this game even exists at all. The fact that the devs managed to release it is admirable. And it's not like they didn't make an effort to improve Lester throughout the game. He goes from flailing his arms screaming from a crab to fighting a full-grown gorilla with a boomerang. His starting attack is a slightly less effective version of playing footsie, but he ends up single-handedly mass murdering a bunch of pirates with nothing but a sword. He learns to sprint with confidence rather than whatever the hell this is, and even improves his terrible posture by the end. What a neat bit of character growth. The credits say to look forward to Lester's return soon, and you gotta respect that confidence, even if the game is less exciting than playing cards by yourself. Super Solitaire for the Super Nintendo is the game I spent the most time on this week. But I don't care, it's fun, relaxing, and the SimCity vibes put me in such a good place. I'm not gonna pretend there's anything new or interesting about it, but it was nice to just enjoy a simple game without analyzing it with a critical eye. Moving up another notch in excitement is Trivial Pursuit on the Sega CD. As someone who has never played Trivial Pursuit, I'm glad this is the one I started with. The presentation and animations were filled to the brim with charm and personality. Not like today's sterilized version of video games based on board games and game shows. But what could possibly top the action of Trivial Pursuit, the intensity of Super Solitaire, and the utter brutality of Lester the Unlikely? The only answer is chess. I don't understand why nobody takes me seriously. Battle chess for the 3DO is just as battle as it is chess. Check this out. Okay, hang on. Gotta walk to the opponent first. Takes a second to get there. Just a bit longer. Almost there. There we go. Wait. Now, okay, now we're gonna do it. Oop, forgot. Gotta turn around, and... Fatality. It's just chess, but with fatalities. This game was such a great idea. That's probably why there were so many iterations of it over the years. I just wish the animation was 2, maybe 3 times faster. And some of these finishers are more brutal than others. Like the king getting fed up and just pulling out his gun. Or a knight getting speared through the dick. Fatality. But some of them are meant to be more comedic, like this Monty Python reference. Or this rook giving the queen a big old bear hug. Oh god, oh my god! 7 games came out on these consoles this week in 1994. Fun fact, I had to rewrite the entire Lester segment since I only played the first level. But after seeing later sections, I thought I would highlight the more positive aspects about it. But nothing can beat the absurdity of Battle Chess. Definitely should check it out if you haven't.
Aw man, I love Battle Chess. I played it on DOS all the time.
Oh really?
Yep, it was one of the only computer games my oldest brother would let us play on his computer. Well, that he knew about, at least.
Yep, same here. I'd sneak into my brother's room to play his games while he slept, but if he woke up, I had to sprint towards the door before he could catch me. It was like a game within a game. Good times.
Good, I'm glad for you.
And I would almost always get caught. Shout out to all the cool older brothers out there. Later, y'all.
Alright, thank you, Dylan. Here in the Collector's Corner, Bonk's Adventure has blasted up in value and is this week's biggest value gainer. Right now, the cartridge alone goes for $685, which is down from $1,000 half a year ago. If you somehow have the box and manual with it, it's then worth a whopping $1,900. Rescue Rangers 2 has also become a pricey NES game. It released costing $39.99, and now it goes for $280. A complete copy goes up to $820. Skyblazer is also a decently valuable Super NES game now. It had an MSRP of $39.99, and the cartridge is now worth $90. Collecting it complete with the box and the manual makes it worth $227. And that's it for today. Next week, January is pretty light for game releases 30 years ago, so we'll be taking next week off. But we'll be back in February with a weird game based on a weird toy line, a spooky horror game about a mansion that isn't about zombies, and Mario's newest rival gets his own game. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some patrons like Alexander Williams, Crooning Wolf, and Delita Wasn't Wrong. Love that name. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, especially if you played any of the games that we mentioned this week. And subscribe if you haven't already. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this show every single Friday. So this is my actual copy of Bonk's Adventure from when I was a kid. I got this when my local video store, Muntz Movie Land, was going out of business. I still got the rental sticker right there. It was sometime in the mid-90s, so when I bought this from them, I got this game for only $5. Really glad I kept it. And I'm glad I kept the rental sticker on the back.